Good afternoon to all of you. As you know, this session is being recorded, so there are a number of technicalities that we are trying to deal with on the best way possible. And we are going to use some working methods that we hope they achieve the output that we want to get from them in a more collaborative way, also probably involving the people at home. Let's see how it goes. Well, concerning the session, as you already noticed, I hope you know the place where you are. You are on the Modern Training Technologies session. And I see that there are quite a few more people than the ones who are registered, as usual, I would say. But that's not a problem, we hope. The session itself, I think that most of you have attended the keynote speech in the morning, the first one, and it was quite interesting to hear how did education change in the last few years, or which new trends in terms of education and technologies appeared in the last few years. And probably what we will try to do, well, what we will definitely try to do in this session is to explore a bit how can we use some of these new trends, how can we look or rethink the way we educate and the way we deliver training in scouting using or adopting some of these new trends in education, at the same time looking at how they can be integrated with new technologies. Just to start and to break a bit the ice in the room, I would like to make you three very simple questions. And the three questions are, which of you have already used any type of technology? It's a very broad question. Can you raise your hands, those who have already used any type of technology in your lives? Not yesterday, not last week, not during the Congress. Anytime during your lives. Yeah, so looking at the room, I would say that 90% of people have already used some type of technology during their lives. Second question, which ones of you have, or which ones of you use technology in a day-by-day basis, like almost every day? Not every hour, but at least every day you use some technology in your lives. And that can go from a mobile phone to a laptop, a computer, a camera, and so on. Can you raise your hands again? Thank you very much for your collaboration. I think now we have even more people replied positive to this question than to the first one, which is amazing, but okay, it works. So we have again 90% of the audience, at least, that use technology in a day-by-day basis. The third question would be a bit more specific. Which ones of you have actually learned something by using technology? And this might require a bit of thinking, but feel free. It's an open question again. Or let me rephrase it. Which ones of you think that you have learned, or you know that you effectively have learned something by using technology? Can you raise your hands again? Okay, a lot of people are still thinking, but I would say that at least 50%, 60% of the audience have learned something by using technology in their lives. The big question is, and probably the big question you are making to yourselves by coming to this session is technology the answer for education in the 21st century? And this was one of the questions that was raised during the morning, as well as one of the questions that we tried to address when we start thinking on the structure for the session and on where do we want to go with this session. Is technology the answer to 21st century education? And when it becomes to scouting, is it technology the solution for training, or let me put it even more specifically, for adult training in scouting? That's the big question we will try to address during the session. In order to do that, we propose a very basic session plan, let's say so, and very concrete objectives for the session. We are not going to focus our approach on technology itself as such, on tools that you can use to train people or to deliver training in your associations. We are going to focus the session on what is beyond the use of technology in training and how can we support the use of some training tools and training technologies in scouting by properly addressing the principles, the educational principles, and the pedagogical approaches that are beyond the use of those technologies. Okay, so we plan to be a bit more, we plan to go a bit more in depth in terms of content for the session, not just addressing the tools, the learning tools or the technologies as such, but understanding why and how can we adopt and use some of the tools available nowadays in terms of technology. Is this clear to all of you, or do you think we should have a new look or a different approach for the session? Very good. I assume that you are okay with the proposed objective for the session. We feel much better now. I think it's a polite thing to do, and it's a useful thing to do as well to introduce ourselves when we start the session, so let's do it very briefly. I already recognize your faces, some of you at least, the majority of you, but I'm sure you don't remember my name. My name is José. I'm one of the European regional office staff members, and I work basically in the area of educational methods. I've focused my work in that area. Together with me, I'm not going to pass them the microphone, they'll have time to talk. I have Peter Hames from Scouting Netherlands, and he will then make his own presentation, as well as Saad Zian from Geneva. Peter was the previous training commissioner of Scouting Netherlands, and Saad is the actual director of adults in Scouting in the central office. Adult resources. He will describe his position as such after, if that's necessary. To get to the topic, we know and we heard during the morning that there were a number of changes in education in the last decades, and we heard, and some of these changes were tackled by the speaker in the morning. We will try to focus on some of them and try to understand the principles that motivated those changes, and then we will explore how can we address those principles through the use of new technologies. That's a bit the plan for the session. And to say that the information available to the learner nowadays is, the amount of information available nowadays for the learner is huge. It's not probably new for you. You already knew that from a situation where it was quite difficult to access knowledge and information, we went through a century where it is quite easy to access information. Information became abundant. That could be a way to describe it. But we think we still took a step ahead. We are on the next level. We are not in a situation where information is abundant. We are in a situation where information is so much that the skills that we need, or the learners need nowadays, to properly understand what is the most valuable information for them, it requires them different skills, new skills that they didn't use to work in the past. If you look at the picture, accessing the right information nowadays is a bit like trying to drink water for such a thing. I mean, it's almost impossible, as you know. It's quite difficult, but the water is there. There are plenty of water, but to access them, to drink the water effectively, is quite difficult. So these skills are really important nowadays when we talk about training and learning processes. The second general change, let's say so, shift, and this again is probably not new for you. We changed from a mindset and a paradigm where we have, or where we used to understand our learning process and teaching processes inside a room, a closed room, like the one where we are today, curiously. And we moved to an environment, an open environment, where we can understand that the environment useful for the learner, or where learning can take place, can be everywhere, pretty much. And this is not just saying that there is a new classroom today. There is a classroom with some technologies which were integrated in the classroom, like cameras, flip charts, whiteboards, interactive whiteboards, digital whiteboards, and so on. That's the change that took place in the formal education world. This is to go again further than that. That was not the shift. The shift was to move to a situation where there is no classroom, pretty much. Learning can take place anywhere. The third and last shift I would like to mention is the shift in roles in terms of learning processes. Again, if you recall the previous picture, the classroom picture, you'll see the teacher walking around and you'll see the students in the classroom. If you recall and if you have a look back on how your training processes used to be in scouting in your associations, you'll recognize that there was as well a shift from a closed environment, an environment where roles were perfectly clear to everyone in the room, perfectly defined, that's the most correct expression, to a situation where roles change and people assume different roles in the learning or in the training session according to the structure that you give to the session. So a teacher can become a learner as well. A learner can become a teacher of his peers. Does this make sense to all of you? Or not really? Okay. But to say that the roles changed is again quite narrow from our perspective. The point here is that people are not really just ready to assume different roles, to take different roles. They are ready to multiply themselves in different roles. A learner nowadays, the student nowadays is able to become a teacher in the classroom, and he's able as well to multitask. He can undertake different approaches in the classroom, in the teaching or in the learning process. He is able to deal with different processes at the same time in the learning process. So the basic picture we got ourselves with at a certain point when preparing the session was, well, there are multiple angles in all this huge framework of analysis. And what we are going to try to do in the next few steps is to bring some order to this chaos in terms of information and in terms of new educational pedagogical approaches. Specifically addressing how can we use them in scouting. So the point here is exactly how can we, in scouting, in training of adults in scouting, adopt or understand which are the most suitable pedagogical and educational approaches to use. This doesn't mean by any way that we should integrate every new trend in education or whatever is happening outside our training processes is correct and can be integrated in what we do and the way we deliver training. This means that, first of all, there are a number of new trends that can take us to rethink the way we deliver training. There are a number of things that we have done in training in the last century, I would say, that were now rediscovered as educational shifts outside in society. So some things that we have already done since the very beginning of scouting, I would say. And the challenge here is really to understand how to put this all together with technology and the use of very specific tools to deliver training. E-learning will come as the last part of the session and as a very practical way, a very concrete way of deliver training. So again, as one of the approaches that we can use to do that, and not the single approach that exists to do it. One of the big questions that was raised during the morning, if you recall, was, well, we all got the picture. There is a new type of learner in the 21st century. The skills that you require outside in society, that people require you to have, are quite different from the ones that you used to need. The question we are trying to answer during the session is, should we have a new type of teacher for the 21st century? Should we also need as trainers in our training systems to understand what does it takes to the trainer in the 21st century to better address or to better prepare and support these new type of learners? Profiling a little bit what are the skills that are required to the learners, and again, some of them you will recognize them from the morning. You'll see that understanding technology and being able to use technology fluently, let's say so, it's one of them. Multitasking is one of them. Being goal-oriented, being having a very focused approach in solving problems are some of these skills as well. The big question is there. So if that's the learner that we have in front of us, how should be the trainer in this case, in our Scout associations? And what do we need from the trainer to move this process forward. And this is the moment I will pass. This is the moment where we think that it's necessary to have an overview of how did we reach this stage in scouting, which were the changes that took place as well inside scouting in the last years, and how can we look at them and understand them in a way that we can better address them in the future through specific models, pedagogical models or educational models that we can use. So basically the question here for this second part is to look at what have we been doing in scouting, in training in scouting, which were the big changes in terms of the way we train people in scouting, and how those big changes can also be compatible with new pedagogical approaches and new models that we can use in the future to deliver training through new technologies. That's the big point for this second part of the session. To continue that, I will pass the micro to my colleague, Saad.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah. The purpose now is to see a little bit what happened in the past. So I want to ask you by small group to start small discussion between us. If we can review the training system from the beginning, try to remind the first training in Gilwell, the first session delivered by BP himself. I'm talking about 1911, 1912. Then the formal first wood badge, 1919. So what happened from this times to now? What kind of changes the way to deliver training within our organization? So I think we are all the experts here in the history of your organization. What kind of training, what it was delivered, the way, how the training was, what kind of relationship between the trainers, all those things around the training, if we can just try to remind us and share between us. So I will ask you to have, let's say, 2 groups here, 1 group, another group there, 1 group in the back of the room, and 1 group here. And we will just take, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes to exchange what was the history of our training models in our organizations. And we'll just try to see if there are some similarity or there are differences, or we have one model, or we already tried different models, was big shift, big changes or not. What happened in the training? So it will take, about 10 minutes just to exchange between you. And then I will ask just very short report from each group just to remind us what was the key point according to you.
Test.
Are there any people online yet? No? Oh. It's reassuring. System doesn't work fluently, but it's a nice try.
message sometimes has to be very moderate. We need to be really careful on the way we address it. Yeah. Because it's not even European. Some European associations are about to say what the Turks say or they say so. We are quite traditional the way they do.
Yeah, there should be a just judgment.
Definitely not. I mean, it suits their context. It suits their association. And I think we have very good examples, whether in training or in education, that whenever you try to apply a model that doesn't fit the context and the people you have in front of you, I mean, it doesn't work. It's simple.
Your role in society.
Yeah, overall, yeah.
Let's see if there's still.
Half an hour? It goes like it's done by the absolutely.
Automatically reconnects with the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Let's see if that works. I'm not sure if that is going to get. Something going on? Or?
Yeah.
Could we wrap up, please? So I will ask each group to, one volunteer from each group just to give us very, very short summary about your discussion. And who will start? A volunteer. If there are no volunteers, it will be volunteer designed. And 2 words. Yeah.
Oh, I can summarize my group. I think we came from various NSOs, and in summary, all I can say is that our training systems are all very different.
Good.
Different. One word.
So I think it's not a joke. It's a really key point. It's a really relevant. We have different systems, and we need to acknowledge that yes, we have different systems. Second group, please.
I've got to stand here, right? Face this way. Oh, that way. What we particularly observed is a difference between NSOs, particularly the Western NSOs have got pressures of legislative compliance, being able to demonstrate today that we've actually covered off certain material, that we can't actually use the good fun stuff all the time of sitting around the campfire and learning and teaching. That said, we all agreed that the coaching and mentoring system is absolutely essential, particularly in some NSOs, but across the board, making sure we've got that mentoring or coaching right is a big challenge and something we're very important we've got to get right.
A volunteer there? No, please here. Yeah.
Yeah, that was me. What on? Well, hi everyone, I'm Kevin. I'm Deputy Chief Commissioner, Adult Resources from Western Australia. Our group at the back were interested in the e-learning that we are doing in Australia and how we introduced it. There was quite a bit of difficulty initially. A lot of our traditional trainers did not accept that e-learning was going to work. So unfortunately, we had to say to some trainers, this is the direction we are going in. You are welcome to come with us, but don't stand in my way. I will run over you. Technology, as we're talking about, is the future of scouting, and particularly in delivering training. In a country like Australia, where in my state alone, there's 4,000 kilometres from the bottom to the top. You can drive for 4 days and not even leave the state. My capital city of Perth is closer to Singapore than we are to Sydney. So the distances are huge. So the advantages of e-learning have been very, very pronounced. We don't have to bring leaders in for training. They can do it online. I was talking to my colleague here from Oman recently. I work in Oman from time to time. I did some of my e-learning from halfway around the world. So internet access is great. I'm aware also Colombia, you've got some e-learning. So it is the way that we are going to go. So the group at the back were interested, how we introduced it, and I shared with them also some of the things that we introduced at the same time, which again has been challenging, but we have achieved it. Thank you.
Thank you. Another key point that I think we need to remind, that also some constraints, the context, force us to make some choices. And e-learning, in this case, for example, is a good example. That because they are not able to gather the people in one room, just because of distance, the technology in this case could be really helpful to solve or to fix the problem. So we got this group saying us that, yes, there are differences. Now we can say that one community, because there are many countries, they have the same problem, the distance. Or I'm not talking about big country like Australia or Canada or Russia. But I think even small country, you can have in the capital a lot of trainers. And in the rural area, you have nobody. So it's not a matter of big country or small country. Even medium country can be in the same situation. Okay, thank you. Third group, or last one.
Hi, I'm Gustav. I'm Director of Education of Swedish Scouts. We discussed a lot of interesting things in our group as well, but since I'm the one standing up here, I get to choose what to say. And I'm going to take up what Elston from Australia said in the very beginning, which I thought was really, really interesting. And he said that we came from a situation where we taught and learned through telling stories to each other. And then we have gone through loads of different periods during history with more teaching, more peer education, nowadays more technology-based, at least part of our education. But maybe we should also think about maybe going back to telling stories to each other, where we actually came from the beginning.
Thank you. So I think that the purpose of the session was also to share between us and to see what happened in different countries, because it's a part of our knowledge, to know what happened in Singapore or in India or whatever, in Colombia, Australia. So all the parts of the world that we can say, oh, that happened in this part of the world. The purpose now is just to help you to see what happened, in fact, in how the training was the results from many things. And also to realize that we're still using some really old things. That does not mean that they are bad. They are still relevant. And even more than that, I think a lot of people are just discovering that we, as Scouts, are doing since years. And we need just perhaps to refresh or to make, let's say, the modern way to present things. But we already done that in the past. So I would try to invite you just to have this trip with me. And the page, the web page for the session, you have some material that you can go back. It will be this presentation, another one, another timeline. So if we go in this first slide, this timeline, at least from the Western world, we have some thought about what mean the education, what mean the learning. And I think we all have in mind some reflection, some concept, beginning from Plato and Aristotle. And I'm sure that here in this part of the world, we can look also in the tradition, in the history of the countries, and probably you have some thinker that they can bring also some really key things. Why we are putting that in the slide? It's just to remind that it's something not new, that we have roots really in the past. But we have also some big changes in the society, and one of them that they really have big impact in our society was this, what happened before or beginning of the 18th century, and this was colonization. And one concrete example for us as Scouts, I think if without the British Empire, I'm not sure that Scouting will be the same as today. Probably, because it was more easy. And this kind of connections was in some way influenced the Scouting. And we have also some other thinker, John Locke. And if we come to the 19th century, one important person was Horace Mann, who was perhaps the first person saying clearly and putting that as a statement about education for all youth. It's perhaps funny for us, but before that it was not obvious. So it was first statement. And we still say exactly the same today. And even we are fighting for that. And then we have, in the middle of the 19th century, one key thinker in the education and modern education, Thorndike, who start the concept of connectivity. The purpose of the session not to go to all the concept and the theories that you can just Google and you have a lot of more than I can say during hours. So just to remind you some key concepts, some key names and history. So the 20th century, and from the beginning, and this is really important for us, we have some key thinker, some key words that we need to have in mind because they are really related to what happened in Scouting. We know that even BP talked about Montessori, and it was the time when the progressive education was starting. So all those people, I can put lots of names here, but again, it's not the purpose, it's just to remind you some key people. It was exactly in the same time that Scouting started in 1907. And the Scouting came with this really interesting concept that we can start thinking about the holistic education. It was really new. That the Scouts are responsible to do something for their own development. And it was really new. That they can be autonomous to choose what they want. It was really new. So all those things, and what we are seeing today, and with even in the formal education people are saying, learner in school must be responsible to develop their own project. It's not, for us, it's not new. 1917, it was beginning of Scouting. So then we had John Dewey with the learning by doing, that as we know, it was the guy who put the concept, the statement. And then we have other names, Piaget. What is important to remind us that the first training was just to tell story, and it was just a session like that, people around BP, and just we start. There are no use of fancy technology or nothing. They're just chatting together and sharing together. But they start to think a very important thing, and that he was, or the purpose for the training, we want to have a good Scouting. New leaders must to know what is Scouting and to deliver Scouting. So it was think from BP time, we need to train the people to deliver what's the purpose of the organization. So it was centered on the objective of the organization, the need of the organization. I want to know, thinking about the needs of the people themselves. We got Piaget with the constructivism and the Second World War. Again, some names. And it's really interesting to remember some keywords that we use on our trainings. Maslow, Rogers, those kind of names. They bring a new concept. New concept like person-centered, human psychology, the motivation pyramid, and so and so. And then we start to move from training in Scouting based or centered in the needs of the organization. We add another layer. It means the need of the individuals, the trainee themselves. If I am training the trainers have some needs. And not just about to deliver Scouting, but I need to have in mind what they need as person. And this is exactly what Carl Rogers says. So this is also important to say that for us as a Scout movement, the first training of trainer, the official one, was in 1945. So we start to deliver training without train any trainer officially. The concept of the training trainer was really become late. We start just learning by doing. Come to the training, come twice, and you become trainer. So just use your experience. But it was not specific content for you to equip you. Your experience is enough. So we start to rethink in the training because we identify that people need some specific tools, specific skills, specific knowledge to be trainer. At the end of 60s, beginning of 70s, we started the technology era. It was the real beginning of the internet, and we start to work with the technology. But also we have some new concept becoming more and more important. I just forgot the previous one, if you allowed me. One keyword was the adult learning, and the first concept was with Lindemann. It was interesting to see Lindemann was before the World War. And the time between his proposal or his concept and scouting to start to implement the trainer and to use this concept of the adult learning was around here. So this is a time between, let's say, academic thinking and what we are using in scouting. So it just, you can read what's in screen and to see all those keywords that we are using today. And we hope that in our training, we try to upload or to download some concept and to see how we can use them. I think what is important for us to have in mind that we are not in a bubble. I heard in some group that our training is still really traditional. And I think we need to shake the tree. Shaking the tree, it's not mean through the old thing. I think you understand that some really old concepts still valid, and we need to use them to refresh them. But perhaps it's just the way how we are using the concept, how we are delivering, and also to think what happened outside. Again, we are not in the bubble, and scouting have to do with the community, what happened in society. And I think this kind of changes, we need to have them. And now the technology or the new technology is not new. Just an example. Do you have an idea about the computer used by NASA to take a human being from the Earth to the moon and to have a tour there and to come back? What kind of size? How many bytes in the computer?
Maybe more than 1 meters.
And what's the capacity of the computer? Mm-hmm. It's just pocket calculator. It's just crazy. With the pocket calculator, you can manage to take a human being from the Earth, to go to the moon, to have a tour there, and to come back. It's just amazing. So we don't need this huge capacity of computer to deliver amazing things. We need just to think how we can use them, the way to use them, how to use this small capacity to deliver that. So I think the challenge is not how we can have the best computer, the best provider, or best software. I think it's not a question. Today, I think that we have some iPads here. I have absolutely no clue how it works. I don't know for you, but for me, nothing. But I know just, yes, I can do that, And it works, and it's enough for me. So I think it's not about how we can be the mastery of technology itself, but we will discuss about that. Just the purpose was just to go in the history to see what happened in the past, was the influence for external thinker in scouting, how we can bring them back to scouting, how we can use these new things. And probably we can add a lot of other names, a lot of other concepts. It was just pity if we stay here without using that. So now perhaps I can ask Peter to follow the process.
Thank you, Saad. Let me see if I can operate this piece of technology. It's still yours. Ah, there it is. The school bus. We have probably all know him. That's a little bit of a symbolic of the start of my story. I used to be the National Training Commissioner of the Scouting Academy in Netherlands. And we used to have a training scheme close to any training scheme in the world. We reached about 40% of our leaders, although it was mandatory to be certified to have a certificate. We still reached 40% of our leaders, and we thought, well, what is it all about? Why do we only reach this level of leaders in our training courses? And we took a look at our system, and we thought, well, actually, it looks like we're going to drive them in a school bus to a learning factory. And we process them to become leaders. And at the end of the course, if you slept all through the course or you were drinking beer all the course, it doesn't matter. If you completed the course, then you will be having a certificate for being a leader. Well, that's not the way all people learn. Of course, some people learn in the way, in the classical training way. They go somewhere, they get some knowledge, practice it, do a test, and they can do it. But that's only 40% of the leaders. What we said, well, we are going to change our training scheme. We're going to change it from modeling, from the way I described, driving people to a learning factory and process them into becoming a leader, to personal development. Personal development, the personal approach for the thing you want to learn. We took a little bit of a look at some technologies, and we said, well, okay, the thing is very, very new at the moment is a flipped classroom, flipped learning, and that looked like the ideas we had at that moment. And this is a scheme I just picked off the internet. I'm also a victim of the technology era, and I just picked it off the internet. But it's quite accurate to describe the learning system, flipped learning. It says on your side, the right side. So for me, the left side, what is organized or what is suggested by the educator. It says, well, okay, if you want to learn something, you should first get some knowledge. And you can do that by yourself, by watching a video or taking an online course or reading a book or ask people or just experience it in an activity. And what are you going to do with it? You're going to practice it. You're going to discuss it. You're going to chew on it. And that's the right side, or for you, the left side, doing some projects. Listening to podcasts about the subject, people who have an opinion about it, and thinking, okay, what is it? What is the knowledge? What's the theory behind it? And what do I want to do with it? And actually, you go back and forth. That's the flipped learning. You go back to the person, the teacher in this, or the trainer in this story, to make sure that you're on the right path. And the teacher, the trainer, becomes more of a coach, a mentor, as I heard in the room already, that some of the organizations says, well, that's the key person in a personal development route. Just look it up, flip learning, flip classroom, and you will find more than enough knowledge about it. And let me just state out that the system that we created is just an example. And it worked in the Netherlands, it worked in our society, but it doesn't have to work in your society. So what I would try to give you in this session is just some thoughts about a different approach to learning. So this is just a Dutch example. That's very important, but it worked for us. What we did, we made some profiles of the people we thought, well, okay, if you're a leader, you have to do certain tasks and you have to have certain skills. We base it on the competence system, and that's because the competence system is used in our formal training and in our formal education. 12 competences we used. We thought, well, that's more than enough. We said, well, the team is more important than the individual if you're talking about qualification. You're going to do the things you do with your scouts with a team. And if the team has a certain quality, that's good enough to have an assurance that the game you play is a good game. What we said, okay, the coach has a very important role. So we're going to make sure that there's a coach on every level in our association. On local level, regional level, and national level, we created some coaches. The most important, and actually the only question that the coach will ask the first time he speaks to the one who wants to do something with his own personal development is, what do you want to learn? What will be your personal development route? And we said, well, you have to test it at one stage. So we're going to create an assessment just to see how somebody functions within his role, within his group. As I said, the different levels, the ground level, that is the local level, and that's the most important level. There's in every unit and every group, however you call the local groups, there's a guide in practice. It's somewhat of a coach, but he's a little bit more than a coach. He asks the question, what do you want to learn? He stands beside the leader and goes along through his personal development route. That's the role the modern day teacher, mentor in the formal schools fulfill. On regional level, we had two different persons. That's a trainer, because you also have to deliver trainings, because people still are going to use trainings. Training is just a good way to learn something. But next to it, we put a coach, and the coach is going to coach the guide in the group. And the same goes for national level. Of course, if we have 45 different regions, so there's somebody who has to be sure that the coaches and the trainers on regional level have a certain quality, and a coach and a trainer. And that's, most of the time, that's the same person. What we discovered throughout the years, it's been since 2008 that we started with the system. We found out that there's a huge need for self-assessment tools. If somebody asks you, well, what do you want to learn, and you start learning or finding knowledge, at one point you want to check if the thing you found is okay, if the thing you've learned meets standards. So we developed a lot of self-assessment tools, and those you can provide in different ways. You can do it online. You can do it by sending a coach with a checklist to have a talk, whatever you want. So what we did, we didn't use technology as what we think is technology. We didn't use a lot of e-learning modules, or we didn't use a lot of technical stuff, but we approached learning in a different way. And I can now say that at least 80% of all our local groups have a guide in practice. And in 5 years, that's amazing. And those guides are all trained and are all know how to guide somebody through a personal development route. In 5 years, we're really proud of that. That was my short story. For sure, there are some questions. If there are detailed questions, I'm always there wandering around to answer them. Just ask me. We want to focus on the session right now, so we're not going to do it in depth right here. I would like to give the microphone back to you for the third part.
Thank you very much. I would like to grab from what Saad and Peter said previously, and I would like to strengthen two messages. First of all, Scouting is not really the type of movement that follows the trend. Scouting is the movement that leads the way forward. And that's the first message. We are not just here to speak about new theoretical approaches, new educational approaches on learning and how to implement them or to integrate them in Scouting. We are here to understand how can some theoretical approaches can fit the way we deliver training and the training models we have back in our associations. That's why the focus of the session is not on tools, is not on technology. And from our understanding and from our point of view, according to how unpredictable changes and how unpredictable the world is at this point and how fast changes are happening in terms of technology and education, the focus is not on education. And probably the solution for the 21st century learner and the training on the 21st century in Scouting is not technology as all. Technology is a way forward, and it is most probably a very valuable complement to the way we deliver training and to make the training and learning processes more effective in Scouting as well. That's the big message. And that's why we went back on this overview of what has happened in Scouting and which trends in society took place in terms of education. And that's why Peter addressed a very specific model that fitted their specific national case, but which should be understood and analyzed again on according to their national context and according to their national training system. The big message here is that there is no solution that fits all of us. That's the big point that we'd like to make before moving to the more technology-based approach or the part of the session where we are going to address concretely e-learning and the technology. Okay, those are the two big messages that I would like to strengthen for my colleagues. To introduce the part on technology, or to be more broad on the very first two comments, information and communication technologies. There is some data, there is a lot of data, as you know, from your countries about the use of new technologies in training and in the education in general. I would like to strengthen two or three very interesting and very important points before moving forward. Those two or three very important points are, as you know, and that's obvious, the use of technology is increasing. Second one, the age range where technology, which are adopting and using technology, the age range which is growing faster in the use of technology, let me rephrase it, are, as you can see, adults between 36 and 65 years old. So if you think about the people you have in your training, in your associations, if you think both about learners and trainers, specifically about trainers, you will see that a lot of them fit in this age range, I believe. So that's one of the points. Access to technology, it's not a new thing again that everyone, well, I'm generalizing it. Almost everyone can access technology easily nowadays. Access to technology is increasing, but it's not just increasing, it is changing as well. People can access technology from different places. Technology can be accessed from home easily nowadays. The last statistics, the last statistic point is indicator is related to how much people are using new technologies. And just according to some of the most recent research, each each person between 20 and 40 years old is using new technology during the day at an average of 10 hours and a half, which means that people between 20 and 40 years old spend 10 hours and a half of their days accessing technology, according to some of the most recent research. I'll provide you the data if you are interested in having a look at it. Usually, we understand and we tackle the topic of technology according to generations and according to the age of people. Again, the idea and there is a slight misunderstanding on that. Technology is not just about age, and the previous indicators here reflected that, as you could see. An interesting data is related to how different generations identify themselves. And these two generations that you can see on the slide, when questioned about what does identify your generation, the people that have the same age of you or which fit on the same generation, which have the same characteristics as you, which are the things that you have in common? What makes your generation? And these two generations, when questioned about that, they answered on the top of their answers was possible to pick that technology is something that identifies them as a generation, as individuals, and it's part of what they are as people. So the big question here is, well, there is a new way of seeing things. Can we move from this new way of seeing things, this new shift, this new paradigm, to a new ways of doing things? So how can we move from all this conceptual framework and all these theoretical approaches to a very practical and implementation level in what concerns training, in this case, in scouting? That's what we are talking about here. And to introduce that, I would like to make a short exercise with you. And the exercise is very simple. When you think about training in scouting, and just to have some interaction here on the room, when you think about training in scouting, which are the basic things that you consider when you are developing training? And I'll give you an example. The question is quite open, quite broad, as you notice it. But when you're thinking about training, we can consider which are the goals of our training. This can be one of the elements we look at when we are developing any training. And here I'm not just focusing on e-learning, I'm speaking generally. We look at the goals of a training module or the goals of a very specific content for our training. And those goals can be based on skills. They can be based on knowledge. They can be mixed, and so on. Whatever do we think when we are developing training? I've already mentioned two different aspects, goals, content, as an example. Is there anything else that we consider when we are developing or designing training in our associations? Guide your user. Engaging your user. Can I say motivation? Is it the same thing? Motivation. Thank you. You mean resources? Delivery. We are not going in depth in the mind map, tackling the different options inside each of these areas. What else more? Uh-huh. Is the response you get in that sense? Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Expertise, mastery. Content, program, structure, okay. Well, we could add some more. I'm sure you have lots of more things that we could add here, like feedback processes, assessment. Sorry, profile? Somebody said? Mm-hmm. Which you can link to the expertise and mastery and so on. We could keep doing this exercise for a long time. What's the point here? The point is, again, to address the context. E-learning or any other different method of delivery is based on all these things and has to be built around these different dimensions. Learning, again, is not just about the tools that you use, the delivery methods that you use, it's about the people that you have, the degree and the level of expertise and mastery. It's about the profile of participants. It's about the way to give feedback and support the learning process with participants. It's about addressing properly the goals and the way you can better support those participants in their learning process. It's not just about implementing a tool, a very specific tool or a technology to deliver training in a different way. A very good example, a lecture it doesn't stop to be a lecture if you record it and if you put it on YouTube. It's still a lecture. It doesn't change as such if it's only a recording that you put on YouTube. It is more accessible, true. It can be more interactive, but it can be more interactive if you give feedback to people, if you support the learner on their process. Otherwise, it has a lot of advantages. It has a lot of value as such, as a tool, as a resource, but it's not really a supported training process or a learning process for the user, let's say so. That's one of the points. To move forward from here, I would like to introduce you a very simple framework in terms of e-learning, and that's the framework we are working now at this point. And the framework is based on 3 different dimensions, 3 different concepts. The concepts that you see there, I would like to start by the learning technologies, the learning activities, what you can find there as learning activities. Usually when we think about e-learning, we focus our attention on the tools that we can effectively use, actually use to deliver the training, like forums, chats, wikis, videos, and all the other type of resources that some of you already know, at least some of them. So I will not go through that examples. That's one of the dimensions. But as you know, and as we all know, and the formal education world proved that very well, there are some pitfalls on this process if you look only at the tools that you use to deliver training. And the best example of that is really what happens inside the classroom. As you know, in the formal education, it's not just because the tools changed inside the classroom that learning processes became more effective. By the contrary, some statistics prove that the fact that the classroom changed and became much more interactive, much more sophisticated technology, resources and tools, learning processes didn't necessarily improve, and the effectiveness of the learning didn't improve as well. The other 2 dimensions are the dimensions that we would like to focus here in this third part of the session. Pedagogical models. Flipped learning, as Peter presented before, is one of the models that you can transfer to a virtual learning environment. It's one of the models that you can use. It has its principles, as you can imagine, as you saw, can be used in a virtual learning environment or delivering training online as well. The other dimension, which is addressed here as instructional strategies, and again, this is a framework, there are other frameworks that can be used, tackles the issue of, well, how can we fit a pedagogical model, a theoretical approach, and how can we deliver that theoretical approach or that training model in very concrete activities? What makes the link between the theory, the theoretical model that we have in our minds, or the theoretical model in which we base our training system, to the tools that we use to deliver it? Instructional strategies basically can be explained by what do your learners actually need so that they can learn, besides having the tools that they need to do it, to learn. To do this, we would like to do an exercise with you, and we would like to try to dig a bit more in those three topics, in those three dimensions. First of all, I would like to know if the explanation on the dimensions was clear. Because if it was not clear, we can provide a couple of examples on it. And then we can move to the exercise. If it was clear, we can move to the exercise, and then we can go back to the examples. Those are the two different options here. So if you prefer an example first, we can move to the example. If not, we can go the way around. Do that? Exercise? Okay. Okay, let's move to the exercise. The exercise is quite simple, and we are going to do it using some technical tools as well. Yeah, it's not because you are going to do the exercise that you receive a gift. We are going to develop a collaborative mind map based on these three dimensions, and the point of the exercise is to understand what we need to address in each of those three dimensions. So basically, the three questions are: which are the learning activities or the tools that we can use to deliver training online through an online training platform, through a virtual learning environment? Let's not get into the conceptual discussion. So which are the concrete tools that we can use to deliver training? That's the first question to one of the groups. The second one is, which pedagogical models or which pedagogical approaches do you know or do you actually use in training, in more traditional, even more traditional training systems in your associations that you think they can be transferred to online training? That's the second question. And the third one is about the way we can enable people actually to learn. Besides the conceptual framework, which are the strategies that we can use so that people can actually use the tools and learn? Okay? I will give you an example before moving to the exercise. Okay? Social learning. Can you raise your hands, those who have heard about social learning? Okay, we have a few people in the room who heard about social learning. Okay, so let's explain social learning briefly in 5 minutes or less than that, 2 minutes. Social learning. Social learning is based on a number of approaches, a number of pedagogical approaches that Peter already addressed, some of them through flipped learning because they are common. Like, it's based on modeled behaviors. What does that mean? It means that besides interaction between people and besides having the social dimension as its core, social learning is based on how can you identify yourselves and how can you learn through other learners. How can you model your behavior through the behavior on other people in your network? Let's put it like this. Stimulus and responses. How can stimulus and responses contribute through the learning process to make it more effective? Observation, attention, development of communication skills between learners, short and long-term memory stimulation. These are some of the characteristics of social learning. This is basically to explain that between what is a pedagogical model, what is social learning as a pedagogical model, as an example, and what are the different tools that you can use to deliver social learning, there are some things that we need. There are some ingredients that we need to make the learning process effectively. And those ingredients are the key to make any type of training delivery effective, and not the tools, not the last part of it. That's the key message here. Getting back to the exercise. Again, the exercise is to look to what are the theories or the models that you use in your associations in terms of training. What are the strategies through which you implement those models? What do you need to implement them? And which are the tools that you can use to do it here? Okay? how are you going to move forward with the exercise? That's the next point. The exercise will be done in 3 different groups, and it has a fixed structure as we have limited resources, as you can imagine, and as it has a collaborative dimension. So other people at home, online users, online participants can add things to the mind maps that we are going to develop. And the concept of the exercise, the base of the exercise is really to develop a mind map, is to go through a brainstorming exercise where you identify the topics on those 3 different areas. Here in the room, we are going to do it in a very simple way. We'll have 3 groups, each group with an iPad, and the 3 groups are connected to the same mind map. So you are using the same tool, the 3 groups. Although you are working on the 3 different topics, okay? The process is clear or not clear? It's clear? 3 groups, each group has an iPad, the 3 groups are connected to the same mind map, so they are building the same tree. Okay, do you have any group? And I'm assuming that there is a group here, second group there, and the last one on the back. Can we decide which group will take each of the dimensions? So I can decide it by myself, which makes it much easier, I believe, at this point. So this group can take the learning activities. Can that group on the back take the pedagogical models? Yeah, that group. And can this group here take the instructional strategies? So what is the way to deliver the training? What do we need? Which are the ingredients that we need to implement a training model?
We have one group that doesn't have an iPad, we give them paper and they do it on paper. It's the same.
Okay, as we have a lot of participants in the room, we will adapt easily, and that means that the group that doesn't have an iPad, we will do the exercise the same way, but in a flip chart, which doesn't make it very collaborative or interactive with other groups, but makes the exercise effective anyway. Okay? And that group, that 4th group can focus as well on the instructional strategies, okay? A last note before you start the exercise, you can visualize what other groups are doing on the beamer, okay? So you can visualize what other groups are developing. What you see in your iPads is what you see there. Yep.
Okay, we're fastly running out of time, and I don't want to keep you from your coffee break. So, how interesting this will be if you see it happening. If you take a look at the screen, then you will see all the collaborative work you did. But we need to wrap it up. So, can I have your attention, please? No, I'm not. I totally lost my authority over here. Okay, people, let's wrap it up. Can I have your attention over here? Thank you very much. Also, Scouting Sweden here in front of me. Can I have their attention as well? Yes, thank you very much. We need to wrap it up because we're out of time. I'm going to ask you per group in one word. It's too damn interesting. I can understand. I'm going to ask you in one word. What's your experience with this exercise? As an entire group, I'm just going to put the microphone under somebody's nose, and in one word, what did you experience during this exercise?
And your question is?
How did you experience this exercise?
Interactive, yes.
Interactive for the first group. Oh, okay, interactive. How did... Oh, I see someone with a phone. One word. How did you experience this exercise?
Oh, I think it's quite instructive. I think as we go along, more ideas get generated, and rather than we were to do it alone. Yeah.
Ah, thank you very much. It's a very long word, but okay. Over here in this side of the room, how did you experience the exercise?
So I think we started with a challenge, which was really to help try and define what the models look like. But I think it's been really instructive. It's allowed us to sit back and see how the three elements come together.
Okay, instructive. Thank you very much. And over here, how did this group experience the exercise without technology?
Enjoy.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, enjoyment. Okay, thank you very much. So for the content wrap-up.
Okay, concerning the content wrap-up, and just to pick some ideas that some of you inserted on the mind map, as well as the group that used the flip chart put down. Just to make it clear, pedagogical approaches or pedagogical models, you found some good examples on the mind map which address some pedagogical models. You have a few more there, but communities of practices, cognitive-based approaches or apprenticeships, peer learning models are very good examples of it. Instructional strategies, role play, collaboration, negotiation is what you do, the processes that you go through to ensure that the learning is effective. And there are lots of good examples as well of learning activities like forums, chats, simulations, and so on from this group. So I think you have picked a lot of very good examples, and this is just to resume a bit of it. Anyway, the idea of the exercise and the big point beyond it is the link between these three dimensions in what concerns any e-learning strategy or any approach to deliver training, any online approach to deliver training. Please keep in mind these three dimensions. They are the key of this framework, and they are the key of an effective learning process from our perspective. I'm sure that all of you are very eager, curious to understand in a more practical sense what is happening around the world in terms of e-learning, which are the different projects being run, which is the expertise already accumulated by some NSOs and some regions, and that will happen on the network of e-learning right after this session. Okay, so if the interest goes further than just the theoretical framework and just and beyond the framework that you can use to deliver online training, please go to that session and be aware, inform yourselves about what is already being doing. There are a number of projects very interesting in different regions, okay? Please don't forget, and Saad is taking care of that right now, he's pointing to me to not forget about it. Please don't forget to fill the evaluation forms, okay? And feel free to come back to us, to any of us, concerning any questions that you might have, or any comments concerning any point of the session, okay? We'll be here, and you can find us outside as well. Thank you very much. It was very good, and thank you for being so active on the exercise as well. Thank you.